Hello and welcome back. I am Ruben Bressler here at Grand Prix Charlotte, and I am here with Ben Stark. Ben, how's it going?
Good.
You just won your last round. You're now X1, right? You're in good position to be in Pod 1, I believe.
Most likely, yeah. There's a lot of people, so
there is a ton of people at this event. So who knows? I don't know how the math really works, but you have a deck that's well. First of all, you're using Dimir cards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not Dimir. I'm really Simic. I had a Verdant Haven and a Prophetic Prism, but I forget what it's called now. I think.
Right. Yeah, it's Prophetic Prism.
Yeah. So I had both of those. So I just splashed like Consuming Aberration and another Dimir card or so.
Sure.
And I had a Dimir Guildgate.
Right. You actually have a 4-color deck now. Since I looked at it, you've got a lot of mana fixing.
Yeah. See, it's not like it's straight 4 though, in like the traditional 4-color green sense.
Sure.
Like 17 of the cards are basically just blue-green Simic.
Yep.
Like I have 3 Shamble Sharks. I've got the Swimmer. I've got a lot of blue-green standard Simic stuff.
Sure.
But then since I had a Verdant Haven and a Prism, I had 2 Gruul Guildgates and 1 Dimir Guildgate. And I didn't really have enough playables to play straight Simic anyway. Sure. I just had to put in like a couple red cards that were easily splashable and pretty good. Clan Defiance and the Swine, the 5/4. And I had to put in a couple blue-black Dimir cards. Consuming Aberration's very good, and the Nightwing card that makes 1/1 flyers.
Yeah, it's called the Nightwing.
Yeah,
good.
So I threw in a couple of those just to get me to 23 playables and to have a little bit of power for the late game.
Sure.
You know, because Shamble Sharks don't always get it done.
It's been doing pretty well for you so far. Do you know who your one loss was to, or what round it was in?
I don't know the person's name. He was a Boros player. He played very well. I made a small mistake during the match. Nothing crucial, but I forgot one evolve or something. He played very well. It was like round 5 or 6 early in day 1.
Sure. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but a lot of people have said that you're one of, if not the best limited player in the world. I want to get your opinion on Gatecrash sealed against Gatecrash draft, since we're about to head into the draft.
Sure, yeah.
I've had several people tell me that the difference between the two is actually larger in Gatecrash than in many sets, if not the widest disparity between the two. Could you talk to me a little bit about the difference between draft and sealed?
Well, the thing is, they're sealed, like, let's say you're playing 4 rounds at your local store where no one has buys, and they're sealed in Grand Prix.
Sure.
In sealed, like, even in a Moto Daily, 4 rounds, you know, and then it ends, and no buys, the sealed is generally pretty sloppy. You know, decks don't have that great a curve, they're not that focused, and that's why the large disparity, because Gatecrash draft is very low curve, very focused, etc. Grand Prix don't really play like that, because with so many rounds, what ends up happening is, like, by the time you're 6-0 or 7-1 or a record like that, you're just playing against these decks that have a good curve and are focused and all of that.
I've noticed, especially in large PTQs and Grand Prix, that 90% of the decks in sealed are worse than the average draft deck, but 10% are way better.
Right, like, basically what I tell people when you're preparing for like later rounds of GPs now is like expect to play against a good draft deck and expect them to have broken rares.
Sure.
In general, in draft, people have a good draft deck and maybe they'll have a broken rare for their colors, maybe they won't. In sealed, I mean, not round 4, not even round 5 at 3-2, but if you're like 6-1, your opponent's just gonna have a good deck and gonna have a broken rare or 2 in those colors, you know? So, you know, you want to play your answers to broken rares, but you don't want to build your sealeds expecting like these sloppy sealed deck grindy games that you often play in like a 4-round sealed Moto Daily or something.
But something that I've noticed about Gatecrash Limited, especially sealed, to me the card that sticks out the most is Angelic Edict, where it's a top flight elimination spell in sealed, and it's sort of middling in draft.
That's because of exactly what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
In draft, your opponent may not even have anything worth edicting. But in sealed, in the later rounds, even though your opponent's deck might still be aggressive and have a good curve, he's got rares, you know? And rares tend to not be that cheap and tend to be very powerful.
Sure.
And they did a decent job with the rares in this set as far as not giving them, like, comes in play abilities or anything ridiculous like that. So at least if you can have an answer like an edict, you can, you know, potentially win a game against some of the more ridiculous
even
cards.
the come into play abilities, like on the Primordials, for example, are reasonable effects like Zombify and Swords to Plowshares.
Well, the Primordials cost 7.
Sure.
So for 7, you know, I mean, it's not fair if you're going to kill all your opponent's creatures, but like you said, a reasonable ability on a 7-drop is okay, you know. But I mean, you know, you're not seeing too many rares in this format like Thrag Tusk or like Grave Titan, like you know, just 4, 5, 6 mana rares that like do something when they leave play or comes into play. I mean, so a card like Angelic Edict, it's not that good in draft because a lot of times you're going to be removing a 3-mana card with it, whereas in the later rounds of sealeds, you're expecting to remove their
right,
bomber.
you're dealing with like Death Pact Angels
all
and,
kinds of cards
and
like
Rubble
that.
Hulks and things like that. Absolutely.
Sure.
So we're about to head into draft. Do you have a now? I watch. A lot of us watched you at the Pro Tour in the very first draft pod. That was a pretty tough pod.
Yeah,
I
it was a tough
imagine
draft.
that this pod is also going to be pretty tough, so being likely pod 1, possibly pod 2 of the largest Grand Prix ever. We saw you audible very quickly.
Yeah, that was a tough draft for me.
Do you have a similar strategy for all drafts, or do you go in expecting to pick something, or what's sort of your mindset when you go into
my
to a
mindset for
top
draft
level
is usually pretty much the same. I always want to be open to reading the draft. I mean, all the draft formats draft a little bit differently. I mean, there are formats like Marauder Block where you can end up with 10 artifacts, so you don't really have to switch out of your color. If the person passing you is blue and you're blue, it's like okay, because if you only get 4 or 5 blue cards, it's okay.
Sure.
In a format like this one in particular, and Return to Ravnica, you're really trying to find the open guilds. You're not so much concerned about sharing colors as you are sharing guilds.
Sure.
You know, if you're Boros and there's 4 Boros players at your pod and a Boros player feeding you, you're going to have a new deck.
Right.
that's
But
what
if there's a Smite available, the Boros deck obviously won't want the Smite
Right, but
most of the time.
That's what happened to me in the Pro Tour in the first draft. Like, you know, the Orzhov just wasn't coming. You know, I didn't see any pets. I didn't see, you know, anything really. After I took the Smite and the Killing Glare, which was second pick, you know, I just wasn't seeing any of the staple Orzhov commons.
Sure.
And the Simic cards were flowing. So, you know, it seemed like there was only maybe one other Simic player at the pod, maybe none, maybe one. And it seemed like there was probably 3 players playing Orzhov or something.
Sure.
So, you know, I jumped ship into Simic and was able, it's unlikely you're going to 3-0 when you have to jump ship, pick 5, but I was able to make a pretty good deck and go 2-1 in a pretty tough pod. I had to play Reduke and go Dennis.
Sure.
And if I had stayed with Orzhov, I would have had no deck. I would have probably 0-3'd or 1-2'd, you know?
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, sometimes you have to switch and sometimes you don't. I mean, my second draft in the Pro Tour, I started out Orzhov and got to stay Orzhov.
Cool.
I was being fed by a Gruul player,
Right.
and, you know, I saw Orzhov that time.
Nice.
You don't plan to switch or plan not to switch. You draft the best cards you can, and then you try and see what's coming, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. But given the choice, you prefer Orzhov, it sounds like?
I'm definitely willing to draft whatever, but given the choice, I think Orzhov is the best, and I think it's very deep. So it's a nice draft. It's a nice guild to draft.
Sure.
Like,
you can typically have 2 decent Orzhov decks at the table.
And it can even support 3. I think. Like I think that if there's 2, both decks can be very good. If there's 3, the decks will probably be good, not great. But
Sure.
like I think it can support 3. I think Simic is very good, but can only support 1. Maybe if there's 2, your deck could be okay, but not that good.
Sure.
You know. So I mean, I would prefer Orzhov. I think it's like I think it's the best deck, and I think it's deep. But if there's a bunch of Orzhov players around me, I mean, I'm not going to take, Smite over Mugging even. You know what I mean? And that's not even that big of a jump. But I'm gonna take the better card. You know? I just hope I can see Orzhov. If I can see Orzhov, I'll be happy.
Sure. Now, last question. I was talking with David Scharfman last round about the sort of niche archetypes that are available in draft that people are sort of uncovering, like the Shadow Alley Denizen Cypher, like sort of blue-black aggro kind of deck where you try and get a 1-drop or a 2-drop with evasion on the board very quickly and Cypher, or the Verdenhaven deck that we'd seen a couple people write about recently. Are there any of those that really interest you that you haven't tried yet?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, I feel like the guilds are all pretty much keyworded to their ability, and they're all good.
Sure.
You know, when I'm drafting Gruul, I want Blood Rush and a low curve. When I'm drafting Orzhov, I want a lot of Extort. And when I'm drafting Dimir, I want a lot of Cypher, and evasion. They're all like that. When you're drafting Simic, the Evolve cards are good. So, I mean, there's not too much as far as niche archetypes in this format. There has been in some past formats.
Sure.
But in a guild format like this, I feel like basically you just want to find a guild that's pretty open and then put together the synergies that the guild offers. I don't think you're looking to do anything too fancy. You know what I mean?
Right, sure. Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome.
Good luck in the following rounds. I hope you open good Orzhov cards.
Thanks. Obzedat.
Obzedat, there you go. Gift of Orzhov at the very least.
Yeah.
And we're going to toss it back to the booth. We'll see you soon.